Elijah was 38 years old, earned a steady $63,000 a year as a freight dispatcher, and owned his duplex in Greensboro's Glenwood neighborhood free and clear. It was a legacy from his mother, a place of quiet brick and blooming azaleas, a testament to a life of careful saving. And at this moment, sitting at his own dining room table, he felt like he owned nothing at all. The table itself was a solid oak piece he'd refinished himself, but the plates on it were part of a $1,200 set from Williams-Sonoma that his wife, Tasha, had insisted they needed. The scent of his homemade chicken and dumplings, a recipe passed down from his grandmother, was being overpowered by the cloying, expensive perfume his mother-in-law, Patrice, wore. It was a Chanel No. 5 knockoff, but she acted like it was the real $150 bottle. "This is quaint, Elijah," Patrice said, pushing a dumpling around with her fork. She was a woman whose presence filled a room, her voice a little too loud, her jewelry a little too bright. Tonight she wore a vibrant purple caftan that probably cost $300, and her fingers, heavy with costume rings, glittered under the soft light of the $80 IKEA dining lamp. "But you know Tasha is used to finer things." Elijah looked at his wife. Tasha was scrolling through her phone, her thumb moving in a blur across the screen. Her deep brown skin was luminous, a stark contrast to the bored expression on her face. Her hair was styled in intricate goddess braids that must have cost at least $250. She didn't look up. "Mama, be nice." Her tone was flat, automatic. "I am being nice. I'm just saying my daughter has vision. She has ambition." Patrice gestured expansively, nearly knocking over a glass of water. "She can't be tied down to this." This was Elijah's life. His steady job, his paid-off home, his debt-free existence. In Patrice's eyes, it was a cage. Elijah kept his voice even. "We're comfortable, Patrice. We have everything we need." Patrice let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a sound like breaking glass. "Need? Oh, sweetie, need is the floor. My Tasha was meant for the ceiling." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that carried across the small room. "That's why this salon is so important. It's not just a business. It's a launching pad. A place for a black woman to build an empire." The salon. It was all they talked about. For 6 months, it had been the centerpiece of every conversation. A high-end salon Patrice wanted to open in Irving Park, the part of town with old money and towering oak trees. The projected cost was a staggering $410,000, a figure that made Elijah's stomach clench every time he heard it. He knew Patrice's credit was shot, and Tasha's savings consisted of a few $1,000s she kept for shopping emergencies. "And we're so close," Tasha said, finally looking up from her phone. A predatory gleam entered her eyes. "Mama found the perfect spot on North Elm Street. The build-out is going to be fabulous. Italian leather chairs, they're $2,200 each. We need 10. And a custom reception desk made of marble." "All it takes is capital," Patrice said, her eyes landing on Elijah with the force of a physical blow. "Some people are sitting on a gold mine and don't even realize it." He knew what she meant. They'd been hinting at it for months. His duplex. The property was worth, in the current market, maybe $280,000. It was his only real asset, the bedrock of his financial security. His mother had worked 2 jobs for 30 years to pay it off. It was sacred ground. "We've talked about this," Elijah said, his hands tightening in his lap. "I'm not taking a loan out on my mother's house." Patrice sighed dramatically. "It's not your mother's house anymore, is it? It's yours. And you're married now. What's yours is Tasha's." She looked at her daughter, a smirk playing on her lips. "Isn't that right, baby?" "That's what the law says," Tasha murmured, going back to her phone. The air grew thick and heavy. The delicious aroma of the dumplings now seemed greasy and stale. Elijah felt a familiar, hot wave of humiliation wash over him. It happened every time Patrice visited. She had a surgeon's skill for finding his insecurities and pressing on them until he winced. His modest salary, his simple tastes, his quiet nature, all of it was fodder for her condescending remarks. And Tasha, his wife of 3 years, never defended him. She just sat there, a silent co-signer on her mother's cruelty. He had believed their love was a partnership, a blending of two lives, but more and more it felt like a hostile takeover. He knew they were frustrated with him. They saw his caution as weakness, his contentment as a lack of drive, but he had no idea just how far that frustration would push them. He had no idea what was coming. What did Tasha's mother really think of him? Have you ever felt completely misjudged by someone whose opinion should matter? Let me know in the comments below and let's talk about it. This particular dinner, however, would become a defining moment, a scene etched in his memory with painful clarity. It was a Tuesday in late May. The rain outside was a gentle patter against the windows of the duplex, a sound that usually soothed him. Tonight, it felt like a mournful drumbeat. He had spent an hour after his shift at the dispatch center preparing the meal, taking comfort in the familiar rhythm of chopping onions and rolling out dough. He did it because he loved Tasha, and he believed these acts of service were the language of a good husband. You know, Marcus just bought his wife a new Mercedes, Patrice continued, naming Tasha's ex-boyfriend. A GLE coupe. That's an $80,000 car, you know. He's a real estate developer. Now there's a man with ambition. That's nice for them, Elijah said, his voice tight. He began clearing the expensive, barely touched plates. Patrice waved a dismissive hand. It's more than nice. It's a statement. It says, I value my wife. I want her to have the best. She paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Some men just don't think that way. They think a paid-off house from their mama is the finish line. Tasha finally set her phone down, the screen dark. Mama, stop. But there was no force behind her words. It was a token protest. I'm just worried about you, baby, Patrice said, her voice softening into a tone of faux concern. I don't want to see your light get dimmed. You're a star. She stood up, walking over to Tasha and kissing her on the forehead. You just need to be in the right sky. Elijah stood by the sink, his back to them, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the porcelain basin. He could feel their eyes on him. He was the obstacle. He was the dim, cloudy sky holding their star captive. Then came the line, the one that would echo in his head for weeks. Patrice turned to Tasha, but she spoke loudly, making sure Elijah could hear every single word. Don't you worry, Tasha. We'll figure out the money for the salon. Men like him, they make a lot of noise, but in the end, they have nowhere else to go. What's he going to do? Leave? And go where? Back to nothing? The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Nothing. His life, his home, his job, his very existence reduced to nothing. He didn't turn around. He just stood there listening to the water run, the sound of his own heart pounding in his ears. He heard Tasha's soft, non-committal hum of agreement. He heard Patrice gather her $600 Michael Kors handbag. He heard the front door open and close. He and Tasha didn't speak for a long time. The silence was a living thing in the room, filled with unspoken resentments. Finally, he turned off the water and dried his hands on a simple $2 cotton dish towel. You think that's true? He asked, his voice quiet. Tasha was already gathering her things, her car keys, her purse. Think what's true, she asked, avoiding his eyes. That I have nowhere to go. She finally looked at him, and her expression was a mixture of pity and annoyance. Oh, Eli, don't be so dramatic. You know how my mother is. She just gets passionate. She walked over and gave him a quick, sterile kiss on the cheek. Her lips were cold. "I'm tired. I'm going to bed." He watched her walk up the stairs to their bedroom, the one in the upper unit of the duplex that they occupied. He stayed downstairs in the kitchen for another hour, cleaning up the remnants of the meal. He washed the $1,200 plates by hand, dried them, and put them away. He wiped down the oak table he had so lovingly restored. And with every methodical motion, Patrice's words played on a loop in his mind. Where would he go? Back to nothing? He had no idea how wrong she was. They had both made a critical mistake. They believed he was trapped not by love, but by limitation. They saw his quietness as weakness and his stability as stagnation. And in doing so, they had given him the one thing he didn't know he needed, a reason to find out exactly where he could go. The facade of their domestic life had been constructed with his labor and their desires. Elijah was the foundation, steady and unseen, while Tasha and Patrice were the decorative, expensive finishes. He remembered the first year of their marriage as a whirlwind of her wants. She'd walked into the duplex, his home for his entire adult life, and declared it drab. The walls, a calming beige, were repainted a stark gallery white at a cost of $3,500. His comfortable, worn-in leather armchair, the one his father used to sit in, was banished to the curb and replaced with a sleek, uncomfortable $2,800 sectional from West Elm that he was terrified of scuffing. He'd paid for it all. He worked overtime shifts, picking up extra dispatch routes on weekends, the crackle of truckers' voices a constant soundtrack to his life. He'd come home at 3 a.m., exhausted, the smell of diesel and stale coffee clinging to his clothes, and find receipts on the kitchen counter. A $450 pair of Stuart Weitzman boots, a $700 shopping spree at Nordstrom, a $200 dinner with her friends at a trendy downtown restaurant he couldn't afford. "You're a good provider, Eli," she would say, wrapping her arms around his neck. Her embrace felt less like affection and more like an appraisal. She was checking the quality of her investment. His deep brown skin, usually warm, would feel cold in those moments. He was a black man who worked hard, who was responsible, who didn't complain. To her, these were not attributes of a partner, but features of a product. He tried to share his world with her. One Saturday, he spent the morning in the small garden behind the duplex, tending to the rose bushes his mother had planted years ago. The thorns pricked his fingers, but he loved the work, the smell of the earth, the vibrant color of the blooms. He cut the most perfect red rose and brought it inside to her. She was on the couch scrolling through Instagram. He held it out to her. "For you." She glanced at it, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. "Oh, thanks." She didn't take it. "Just put it in some water or something." "But not in the living room. It doesn't match the aesthetic." The aesthetic. His mother's roses didn't match the $2,800 gray couch and the $3,500 white walls. He took the rose into the kitchen and put it in a simple glass jar, placing it on the windowsill where he could see it. It felt like a small act of rebellion. He paid the bills on time, every time. The electricity, the water, the internet, all drawn from his $63,000 salary. Tasha's income as a part-time marketing assistant, around $22,000 a year, was her fun money. He never saw a cent of it go toward their shared life. Patrice was a constant, looming presence. She'd drop by unannounced, always finding something to criticize. "This place still smells like an old person's house," she'd declare, wrinkling her nose. She'd open his refrigerator, surveying the contents with disdain. "Don't you ever buy anything organic? Tasha needs proper nutrients." She'd say this while Elijah was literally cooking them a meal from scratch, The pressure for the salon started subtly. "Tasha has such a gift for style," Patrice would say. "She should be her own boss." Then it escalated. They started leaving brochures for small business loans on the coffee table. They'd talk about commercial real estate listings in Irving Park as if the decision had already been made. Elijah felt like a bystander in his own life. One evening, about 8 months before the fateful dinner, Tasha had come to him with a proposal. "Babe, what if we got a home equity line of credit? Just a small one. To help Mama get the salon started. We could get maybe 50,000, and it would be like an investment." He remembered the cold dread that filled him. "Tasha, no. This house is all I have. It's my mother's legacy. It's paid for. I don't want to put it at risk." Her face had hardened. "It's our house now, Eli, and you're not risking it, you're using it. It's a dead asset just sitting there. Why have a gold mine if you're not going to dig?" The same phrase her mother would use months later. It was clear they rehearsed their lines. He'd held firm then, and the argument that followed was bitter and cold. She'd slept in the guest room for 3 nights. When she finally returned to their bed, she didn't apologize. She just acted as if the disagreement had never happened, a tactic of emotional erasure that left him feeling disoriented and alone. He thought he had won that battle, that he had drawn a line in the sand. He believed that his no was the end of it. He was so tragically wrong. He was living in a house with 2 women who had already decided his property, his legacy, and his security were theirs for the taking. They were just figuring out the logistics. The cruelty wasn't always grand and theatrical. It was often small, 1,000 tiny cuts that bled him of his confidence and his peace. It was in the way Tasha would tell a story to her friends, framing him as a lovable but simple-minded homebody. "Oh, Eli would never go to a place like that," she'd laugh, describing a new art gallery or a wine bar. "He's happy with his TV and his tools." She painted him as a rustic caricature, a folksy counterpoint to her own sophisticated aspirations. He would be sitting right there, smiling tightly, feeling himself shrink. It was in the gifts they gave him. For his 38th birthday, Tasha and Patrice had proudly presented him with a set of Craftsman wrenches, a $150 value. "So you can keep fixing things around this old house," Patrice had boomed. For Christmas, he had spent over $1,000 on a David Yurman bracelet for Tasha, something she'd pointed out in a magazine. She and her mother gave him a subscription to a lawn care service, costing $60 a month. "To free up your weekends," Tasha had said, but the message was clear. His hobbies were chores, and his time was better spent facilitating her life. The financial disrespect was constant. He'd balance his checkbook every Sunday night at the oak table, a ritual of fiscal prudence his father had taught him. He saw the steady drain. The joint checking account, which was funded almost exclusively by his paycheck, was perpetually hovering near zero by the end of the month. He'd see charges for $80 brunches, $150 spa treatments, and endless purchases from online boutiques. When he tried to talk to Tasha about a budget, her eyes would glaze over. "Eli, you worry too much about money. We have to live. You can't take it with you." "We're not living, Tasha. We're just spending," he'd argue. "There's a difference. We have no savings. What if the furnace breaks? What if I lose my job?" "You won't lose your job," she'd say dismissively. "You're too reliable." It wasn't a compliment. It was a diagnosis. He was predictable, a machine that would always function. The most painful moments were when Patrice would rewrite his own history in front of him. One afternoon, some of Tasha's friends were over, women with expensive handbags and an air of casual wealth. They were admiring the duplex. "It has such good bones," one of them said. Patrice, holding court in the living room, seized the opportunity. "Oh yes, Tasha has done wonders with it. When she first brought me here, it was so dark and dreary. We had to gut the whole thing, really. It was Tasha's vision that made it what it is today. Elijah was in the kitchen making them all iced tea. He heard every word. Tasha's vision. He looked at his hands, calloused from sanding the floors. He thought of the weekends spent painting, the hours spent installing new light fixtures. Tasha hadn't lifted a finger. She had pointed and criticized while he worked. And here was her mother, erasing him from his own home, from his own labor. Tasha just smiled, accepting the praise as her due. The contempt they had for his job was palpable. Freight dispatching wasn't glamorous. It was a world of logistics, of maps, of gruff voices on the other end of a radio. But it was skilled work that paid the bills and kept the country moving. To them, it was a source of embarrassment. My son-in-law is in transportation, Patrice would tell people, her voice dripping with disdain. Once, Tasha's cousin asked him what he did. Before he could answer, Tasha jumped in. He works on the phone. It's complicated. She changed the subject immediately. She didn't want her friends, with their lawyer and doctor husbands, to know she was married to a man who coordinated truck routes. These moments of escalating betrayal built up inside him, a silent mounting pressure. He absorbed the insults, the dismissals, the casual cruelty. He told himself it was just Patrice's way. He told himself Tasha was just stressed about the salon. He made excuses for them because the alternative, that his wife and mother-in-law held him in utter contempt, was too devastating to face. The night of the "where would he go" comment was not an aberration. It was a culmination. It was the moment all the small cruelties coalesced into a single, undeniable truth. They didn't just disrespect him, they thought he was a fool, a captive, a man with no options. They had him right where they wanted him, a stable asset to be leveraged for their own dreams. And as he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, the rain still tapping against the window, he felt a profound shift inside him. The hurt was still there, a deep, throbbing ache. But something else was growing alongside it, a cold, quiet resolve. The question was no longer if he had somewhere to go, but when he would leave. The discovery came on a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after that terrible dinner. The air in the dispatch office was thick with the smell of burnt coffee and industrial-grade air freshener. Elijah was in the zone, juggling 3 different routes, a symphony of logistics playing out on the 4 monitors in front of him. A driver was stuck in traffic outside of Baltimore. Another needed a new route around a chemical spill in Louisiana. And a third was trying to make a delivery in Chicago before his hours of service expired. This was his world. It was complex, demanding, and he was good at it. Here he was respected. Here he was competent. His personal cell phone was always on silent during his shift, but the rule didn't apply to the office landline on his desk. At 2:17 p.m. it rang. He picked it up, his eyes still glued to a weather map. "Dispatch, this is Elijah." "Hi, Elijah," a cheerful female voice said. "This is Brenda from Premier Title and Escrow. I'm just calling to confirm your appointment for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Elijah's mind was still on a low-pressure system moving over the Rockies. "Appointment? I don't think I have an appointment with you." "Oh," the woman said, a note of confusion in her voice. "Let me see here." "Yes, Elijah and Tasha Miller for the cash-out refinance closing on your property at 1247 Glenwood Avenue. You're listed as the co-borrower." The world stopped. The chatter from the radios, the clatter of keyboards, the voices of his colleagues. It all faded into a dull, distant roar. Co-borrower. Refinance. Glenwood Avenue. The words didn't make sense. "There must be a mistake," he said, his voice sounding strange and far away. "I didn't apply for any refinance." Brenda from Premier Title went quiet for a moment. He could hear the faint sound of papers shuffling. Well, this is awkward. The loan was approved last week. We have all the paperwork here, signed by both you and your wife. We were just scheduled for the final signing tomorrow to disperse the funds. Signed. The word hit him like a punch to the gut. He hadn't signed anything. He hadn't seen any paperwork. He hadn't spoken to any loan officer. Can you tell me the loan amount?" he asked, his throat suddenly dry. "Of course. It's a home equity loan for $186,000, she said matter-of-factly. $186,000. The blood drained from his face. He felt a wave of nausea so intense he had to grip the edge of his desk to keep from falling. It was a number that made no sense, and all the sense in the world. It was the capital Patrice needed for her salon. The Italian leather chairs, the marble desk, the build-out. It was all being funded by a loan against his mother's house, a loan he knew nothing about. "Sir? Elijah? Are you still there?" Brenda's voice was laced with concern. He had to think fast. He couldn't let on that this was a crisis. He couldn't let her cancel the appointment or alert Tasha that he knew. He needed information. He needed proof. A new cold part of his brain took over, a part that was used to dealing with emergencies and finding solutions under pressure. "Yes, sorry," he said, forcing his voice to sound normal, even a little bit sheepish. "You know what? I completely forgot. My wife handles all the finances. She must have set it up. My head's just been all over the place with work." It was a plausible lie. It fit the narrative they had created for him. The simple, forgetful husband. "Oh, thank goodness," Brenda said, relieved. "You had me worried for a second. So, we'll see you both tomorrow at 9? "Actually," Elijah said, thinking on his feet, "something's come up at work. A big shipment I have to manage. There's no way I can make it." "Can Tasha sign the final papers on her own?" "Well, since you're a co-borrower and on the title, we really need your signature on the final closing documents," she explained. "But the bulk of the paperwork has already been signed and notarized. Let me check with the lender." Okay, they're saying, as long as we have the originally signed and notarized loan agreement, she can attend the closing to accept the check. Notarized. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Forgery on that scale needed a notary. "Great," Elijah said, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Can you do me a huge favor? My wife has been handling everything, and I'm completely in the dark on the details. Could you email me a copy of the loan package? The one we supposedly already signed? I just want to look it over before she finalizes everything." "Of course," Brenda said cheerfully. "I can send the PDF right over. What's the best email for you?" He gave her his personal email address, not his work one. He thanked her, told her he was sorry for the confusion, and hung up the phone. He sat there for a full minute, staring at his computer screens, but not seeing them. He felt like he was floating outside his own body. The betrayal was so immense, so audacious, it was almost hard to comprehend. They hadn't just gone behind his back. They had stolen from him. They had forged his name, his identity, to take the single most important thing he owned. His hands were trembling. He took a deep, shuddering breath and minimized his dispatching software. He opened his personal email. A few seconds later, a new message popped up. The subject line read, "Loan Documents, Miller, 1247 Glenwood Avenue." He clicked it open. He downloaded the attached PDF, a file that was 78 pages long. He scrolled through pages of legal jargon and financial disclosures until he found it. The signature page. And there it was, his name, Elijah Miller, written in a hand that was a clumsy, almost insulting imitation of his own. And next to it, Tasha's confident looping signature, and below that, the notary stamp. He leaned closer to the screen, his blood turning to ice. He recognized the name, Cynthia Dubois, Tasha's cousin, the one who worked as a paralegal at a small law firm downtown, the one they always called Auntie Cynthia. She had notarized a forged document. This wasn't just his wife and mother-in-law. This was a conspiracy. He closed the file. He looked around the office. Everything was exactly as it had been 5 minutes before. His colleague, Dave, was yelling at a driver over the radio. The coffee pot was still gurgling. The world hadn't changed. But his entire life had just been detonated, and no one else knew. He felt a sudden, terrifying urge to stand up, to scream, to smash his monitors. He wanted to call Tasha and unleash a torrent of rage and pain, but the cold, logical part of his brain, the dispatcher, held him back. Confrontation was what they would expect. A loud, emotional fight that they could twist and use against him. A scene they could paint as him being irrational and controlling. No. He wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. He was going to be calm. He was going to be methodical. He was going to be strategic. He opened his dispatching software again, found the route for the driver in Chicago, and calmly, clearly gave him new instructions. He worked for another 2 hours, his focus absolute. He compartmentalized the searing betrayal, locking it away in a box in his mind. He was a man with a job to do, and he had just been given a new one. Dismantling the lives of the people who had tried to destroy his. That evening was the longest of Elijah's life. He left the dispatch center at exactly 5 p.m., just like any other day. On the drive home, he stopped at the grocery store and bought ingredients for spaghetti bolognese, Tasha's favorite. The act of walking through the aisles, of picking out a can of San Marzano tomatoes for $4.50 and a package of ground beef, felt surreal. He was a man playing the part of a husband, a role he now knew was a sham. Every normal action was a lie. When he walked into the duplex, Tasha was on the couch, laptop open, looking at websites for salon equipment. She smiled at him, a bright, false smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hey, babe, how was work?" "The usual," he said, forcing a smile back. His heart was a cold, heavy stone in his chest. "Crazy day. Thought I'd make some pasta." "Ooh, yum," she said, her attention already back on the screen. "Look at these styling stations. They're from Italy, only $1,900 each. Aren't they gorgeous?" He looked at the picture. Sleek, black chairs, and minimalist mirrors. He did the math in his head. 10 chairs? $19,000. It was a fraction of the $186,000 she had stolen from him. "They're nice," he said, his voice a marvel of control. He walked into the kitchen and began to cook. Every sound was amplified. The chop of the knife on the cutting board, the sizzle of onions and garlic in olive oil, the clink of his wedding ring against the pot. It felt like a countdown. He was a bomb, quietly ticking. He had to act normal. He had to play the part of the oblivious, simple husband they thought he was. It was the only way to protect himself. It was the only way to gather what he needed. Over dinner, she was giddy with excitement. "Mama and I have a big surprise coming," she said, twirling spaghetti around her fork. "We can't say anything yet, but our dreams are finally about to come true." "That's great, Tasha," he said, taking a bite of pasta that tasted like ash. "I'm happy for you." The lie was surprisingly easy to tell. He was discovering a capacity for deception he never knew he possessed. "You'll see," she said, her eyes shining. "You'll be so proud of us. We're going to be a powerhouse family." He just nodded, chewing slowly. He wanted to ask her. He wanted to say, "Did you really forge my name? Did you really steal my mother's house from me?" But he held the words in, letting them burn at the back of his throat. A direct confrontation would only lead to more lies. She would deny it, call him crazy, and then she and her mother would accelerate their plans, perhaps trying to cover their tracks. He couldn't risk it. He needed the element of surprise. Later that night, as they lay in bed, she snuggled up against him. "You're being quiet tonight," she murmured into his back. "Just tired," he said. "Long day." "Well, you won't have to work so hard forever," she said, her voice full of promise. "Once the salon takes off, you can quit that stressful job. You can just stay home and take care of the house." The condescension was staggering. She saw his future as her domestic assistant, funded by his own stolen equity. He lay perfectly still, feigning sleep, while every muscle in his body screamed with tension. He waited until her breathing deepened into a steady rhythm. Then he carefully slipped out of bed. He went downstairs to his small office, a corner of the lower-level living room. He sat at his desk and opened his laptop. For the next 3 hours, he worked. He downloaded the fraudulent loan application and saved it to a secure, password-protected USB drive, a $20 purchase from Staples that felt like the most important investment of his life. He went to the county's Register of Deeds website and, for a fee of $5, he pulled the public records for his property. He found the original deed, the one that showed he had taken ownership of the house a full 2 years before he had even met Tasha. He downloaded it. He then searched for the new lien filing from the finance company. He found it, recorded just 3 days prior. It was all there, a digital paper trail of their crime. He created a new folder on the USB drive. He labeled it Evidence. He saved screenshots of the salon's Instagram page where Patrice had posted, "Big news coming soon, #bossmoves, #generational wealth." He found Tasha's cousin, Cynthia Dubois, on the state notary public database, confirming her commission was active. He documented everything. The hardest part was the next day. He woke up at his usual time, 6 a.m. He made coffee. Tasha came downstairs dressed in a sharp-looking $400 Calvin Klein pantsuit. "Big day," she said, grabbing a mug. "Wish me luck." "Luck for what?" he asked, playing dumb. "You'll see," she said with a wink. She was on her way to the title company to pick up a check for $186,000 in his name. "I'm going to meet Mama. We're going to celebrate tonight. Get ready for champagne." He just smiled. "Okay. Have a good day." He watched her pull out of the driveway in her Toyota RAV4, a car he had co-signed for. The entire day at work was an exercise in extreme self-control. He knew that at 9 a.m. she was sitting in an office, signing the last papers. He knew that by 10 a.m. she likely had a cashier's check in her hand. A check that was technically half his, but that he would never see. He imagined her calling her mother, their triumphant, shrieking laughter. The thought made his stomach turn, but he pushed it down. Emotion was a liability he could not afford. His outrage had to be channeled into action. That night they went to Patrice's house for the celebration. Patrice, beaming, popped a bottle of Veuve Clicquot, a $65 bottle of champagne. "To new beginnings," she toasted, her eyes glittering with victory. "To women who make their own way." They presented him with a folder. Inside was an architectural rendering of the salon. Salon Patrice, it was called. It was beautiful, all glass and chrome and light wood. "We're signing the lease tomorrow," Patrice announced, "and paying the first 6 months up front plus the contractor's deposit, $150,000 all in." "Wow," Elijah said, looking at the drawing. "Where did you get that kind of money?" Patrice and Tasha exchanged a look, a shared, secret smile. "Let's just say a very smart investment finally paid off," Patrice said, tapping the side of her nose. "Tasha is a financial genius." Tasha blushed, basking in the praise. "I just saw an opportunity and I took it," she said, glancing at Elijah. Some people are afraid to take risks, not me. He was living in a nightmare. He was sitting there, drinking champagne, toasting the success of a business that was being funded with his life security. They were so arrogant, so sure of themselves. They were celebrating their crime right in front of his face. It was at that moment he knew there was no going back. There was no explanation, no apology that could ever fix this. His marriage wasn't just broken. It had been a lie from the very beginning. The woman he loved had looked at him and seen not a partner, but a mark. The first phone call he made was the hardest. The next morning, a Saturday, he waited until Tasha left for a planning brunch with her mother. He sat at his kitchen table, the sun streaming through the window, illuminating the rose in the glass jar. It was starting to wilt. He looked up the number for a law firm that specialized in real estate fraud. His hands were sweating as he dialed. "Good morning, Miller, Evans and Chase. How can I direct your call?" a professional voice answered. "Hello," Elijah said, his voice cracking slightly. He cleared his throat. I think I need to speak to an attorney about a possible forgery on a property deed." He was put through to a paralegal who took down his information with practiced efficiency. An hour later, his phone rang. It was a private number. "Is this Elijah Miller?" a deep, calm voice asked. "Yes." "This is David Chen. I'm a senior partner at the firm. My paralegal gave me a brief overview of your situation. I have a 30-minute opening right now if you'd like to talk." For the next half hour, Elijah sat in his own kitchen and laid out the entire story. He spoke with the precision of a dispatcher relaying critical information. He told Chen about the duplex, his mother, his marriage. He described the phone call from the title company. He detailed the documents he had downloaded, the original deed, the fraudulent loan application, the notary's information. He didn't editorialize. He didn't rail about the betrayal. He just presented the facts, one after another. There was a long silence on the other end of the line when he finished. "Mr. Miller," Chen said finally, his voice sober, "you have a very serious problem. But based on what you're telling me, your wife and her mother have a much, much bigger one." A wave of relief washed over Elijah, so potent it almost brought him to his knees. He wasn't crazy. This was real. "What you've described as bank fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy," Chen continued, "the fact that the property was your sole and separate property before the marriage is a critical detail. The forgery is the central criminal act, and the involvement of the notary, a family member, makes this a clear-cut conspiracy. This is not just a messy divorce. This is a felony." Chen's fee was $600 per hour. He required a $10,000 retainer to take the case. It was almost all the money Elijah had in his personal savings account, an account Tasha didn't know existed. He had been saving it for a new car. "I'll transfer it today," Elijah said without hesitation. "Good," Chen said. "Here's what we are going to do. First, you will continue to act as if you know nothing. Do not confront them. Do not change your routine. We need them to feel secure. Second, I want you to forward me every single document you have. The loan application, the deeds, everything. I also want you to start a log. Document every conversation you have with your wife and mother-in-law about the salon. Dates, times, what they said, especially any mention of money." He instructed Elijah to go to his bank on Monday morning and open a new account at a different branch, one with no connection to any of their joint accounts. He was to have his paycheck direct deposited there from now on. "The third thing," Chen said, his voice hardening, "is that we need to move fast. That $186,000 is likely already in an account they control. They are probably about to start spending it. We need to freeze those assets before the money disappears." Chen explained the plan. He would draft a formal complaint and a motion for an emergency injunction. but he advised against filing it right away. A public court filing will tip them off, he said. I have a better idea. You mentioned they are having a grand opening for this salon? Elijah's mind flashed to the save-the-date email Tasha had forwarded him. A ribbon-cutting ceremony in 3 weeks. Perfect, Chen said. There was a grim satisfaction in his voice. Public events make people feel powerful, and they make them careless. We're going to let them have their party. Let them invite all their friends and feel like queens for a day. Chen then laid out the strategy for the strike. He wouldn't just file a lawsuit, he would contact the fraud investigation unit of the bank that had issued the loan. Banks do not like being defrauded, Chen said dryly. They have their own investigators, and they are far more terrifying than a process server. We will provide them with our entire evidence package. We will also file a formal complaint against the notary, Cynthia Dubois, with the Secretary of State's office. Her career is over. The plan was surgical. It was devastating. It was designed not just to reclaim his property, but to hold every single person accountable in the most public and undeniable way possible. Are you prepared for this, Mr. Miller? Chen asked. This will end your marriage. It will get very, very ugly. Elijah looked around his quiet kitchen. He looked at the worn wooden floor, at the sunlight hitting the cabinets he'd installed himself. He thought of his mother's rose, now drooping, its life almost spent. He thought of the phrase, where would he go? I'm prepared, Elijah said, his voice steady and clear. Let's begin. For the next 3 weeks, Elijah lived a double life. By day, he was the same dependable freight dispatcher. By night, he was a man methodically preparing for war. He cooked dinners. He watched movies with Tasha, feigning interest. He listened to her endless, excited chatter about the salon's progress. She and Patrice were spending money at an astonishing rate. New flooring was installed for $18,000. A custom sign was ordered for $7,500. A $5,000 deposit was paid to a catering company for the grand opening party. He logged every detail, every dollar amount she mentioned. In a small black notebook he kept hidden in his work locker. 1 week before the ribbon cutting, Patrice held a preview party for a few close friends at the half-finished salon. Tasha insisted Elijah come. He walked into the space on North Elm Street, and his breath caught. It was huge, bright, and expensive. The 10 Italian leather styling chairs, each one costing $2,200, were still wrapped in plastic. The marble reception desk was a monument to their crime. Patrice, wearing an $800 Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress, was glowing. "Elijah, what do you think?" she demanded, throwing her arms wide. "Isn't it magnificent? From a dream to a reality." "It's something," he said, looking around. He could see the ghost of his mother's hard work in every polished surface. He could feel the weight of the fraudulent $186,000 loan pressing down on him. Tasha sidled up to him, linking her arm through his. "See, babe? I told you. You just have to have vision." She leaned in and whispered, "And Mama's making me a 50% partner. We're going to be rich." He looked at his wife. Her eyes were dancing with ambition and greed. There was not a trace of guilt or remorse in her beautiful face. She truly believed she had done nothing wrong. She believed she was entitled to his home, his security, his future. It was the last piece of confirmation he needed. Any lingering doubt, any wisp of hope for reconciliation, evaporated in the chemical-scented air of the half-finished salon. He was not just taking back his house, he was taking back his life. Have you ever had to play along while knowing a devastating truth? The strength it takes is immense. Share your story of quiet endurance in the comments. We can all learn from each other's resilience. The day of the strike was a perfect Saturday in June. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. Sunlight streamed down on Greensboro, making the city glitter. Elijah woke up at 6 a.m., the same as always. Tasha was already awake, a bundle of nervous energy. She had laid out her outfit the night before. A custom-made silk jumpsuit in a shade of brilliant emerald green, a garment that had cost $2,400. "Today's the day," she said, buzzing around the bedroom. "I can't believe it's finally here." Elijah sat on the edge of the bed, tying the laces of his simple $89 Timex watch. "I'm proud of you, Tasha," he said. The words felt like gravel in his mouth, but he had to maintain the illusion until the very end. "You should be," she said, pausing to look at her reflection. "After today, everything changes. No more scraping by. No more living in your mother's old house." The casual cruelty of the remark, even on this day, was breathtaking. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the salon. According to David Chen, the plan was locked in. At exactly 2:15 p.m., in the middle of Patrice's big speech, 2 individuals would arrive. One was a senior fraud investigator from the bank. The other was a uniformed officer, there simply to keep the peace, but whose presence would be an undeniable statement. They would not make a scene. They would quietly and professionally approach Patrice and hand her a thick envelope. The envelope would contain a notice that all her accounts were frozen pending a fraud investigation, a copy of the formal complaint filed with the state against the notary, and a letter demanding the immediate return of the $186,000. A process server would simultaneously be delivering an identical package to Tasha's cousin, Cynthia, at her home. Elijah was not going to be there. Chen had been adamant about that. "Your absence is part of the strategy," he'd said. "Let them look for you. Let them wonder. Your power, at that moment, is in your silence." So, Elijah had a different plan. At 9 a.m., he told Tasha he had to go into the office to handle an emergency shipment. It was a lie, but she was too distracted to question it. "Okay, babe, but don't be late for the party. I want you front and center when we cut that ribbon." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," he lied. Instead of going to work, he drove to a U-Haul facility on West Wendover Avenue and paid $29.95 to rent a small moving truck for the day. Then he drove the truck back to the duplex and parked it a block away, out of sight. He walked back to the house, let himself in with his key, and began to pack. He was methodical. He was silent. He started in the bedroom. He took out 2 large cardboard boxes. He opened his side of the closet. He packed his clothes, his work shirts, his jeans, his few good suits. He packed his shoes. He left behind every gift she had ever given him. He opened his dresser drawers. He packed his socks, his t-shirts, his underwear. He worked quickly, his movements economical. There was no sentimentality. This was a logistical operation. When he was finished, his side of the closet was bare. His dresser drawers were empty. He walked into the bathroom and gathered his toiletries. His toothbrush, his razor, his $8 bottle of Nivea aftershave. He left her side of the bathroom untouched, a museum of expensive creams and serums that cost hundreds of dollars. He carried the boxes downstairs, out the back door, and down the block to the waiting U-Haul truck. He made 4 trips. He packed his tools from the garage. He packed the box of his mother's old photo albums. He packed the small framed print of a jazz musician that had hung in his office. He took the wilting rose from the kitchen windowsill and carefully placed it on the passenger seat of the truck. By 1:30 p.m., he was finished. He walked through the duplex one last time. It looked strangely lopsided, as if one half of its soul had been surgically removed. Her things were everywhere, loud and colorful and expensive. His things were gone. He went to the oak dining table and placed a single key on its polished surface, the key to her RAV4. On top of the key, he placed his wedding ring. He walked out the front door, leaving it unlocked. He would never enter it as Tasha's husband again. He got into the U-Haul truck, started the engine, and drove away from Glenwood Avenue without looking back. Meanwhile, in Irving Park, the party was in full swing. A crowd of about 70 people mingled on the sidewalk in front of Salon Patrice. There were balloons, a DJ playing soft jazz, and waiters serving champagne in tall, elegant flutes. Patrice was a vision in a shimmering gold dress that cost at least $3,000. She stood on a small, temporary stage, a microphone in her hand, beaming at the crowd. Tasha stood beside her in her emerald green jumpsuit, looking radiant and triumphant. Her cousin Cynthia, the notary, was in the front row cheering them on. At 2:15 p.m., just as Patrice was saying, "This salon is a testament to the power of a woman's dream," a black sedan with government plates pulled up to the curb. Two men got out. One was a tall, imposing black man in a sharp, conservative suit. The other was a uniformed Greensboro police officer. They did not rush. They moved through the crowd with a quiet authority that made people instinctively step aside. They walked directly to the stage. The man in the suit waited for a pause in Patrice's speech. "Patrice Miller?" he asked, his voice low but clear. Patrice's smile faltered. "Yes?" The man handed her a thick manila envelope. "I am John Franklin, an investigator with North State Bank's fraud division. You've been served." The crowd went silent. The music seemed to stop. Tasha's face went white. She looked wildly around the crowd, her eyes searching for Elijah. But he wasn't there. Patrice stared at the envelope as if it were a snake. Her hands trembled as she opened it. She pulled out the first page. The words "Notice of Asset Freeze" were printed in bold red letters at the top. Her face, which had been glowing with triumph moments before, crumpled. The color drained from her cheeks. She looked at Tasha, her eyes wide with panic and confusion. Tasha snatched the papers from her mother's hand. She read the words "bank fraud," "forgery," "conspiracy." She saw the copy of the loan application with the clumsy, forged signature. She saw the formal complaint against her cousin Cynthia. A low murmur went through the crowd. People were pulling out their phones, starting to record. The grand opening of Salon Patrice had just become a public spectacle of humiliation. "Where's Elijah?" Tasha shrieked, her voice high and panicked. "Where is my husband?" But Elijah was miles away, driving the U-Haul truck to a storage unit he had rented under his own name. His phone, which had been silent all day, began to vibrate. A call from Tasha. He ignored it. A text message popped up. "Where are you? Call me now." He ignored that too. Another call, this time from Patrice. He let it go to voicemail. The strike was complete. The bomb had detonated, and he was not there to witness the explosion. He was already on his way to his new life, a life built on his own terms, far from the wreckage. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The first voicemail on Elijah's phone, left at 2:21 p.m., was from a frantic Tasha. "Elijah, where are you? Some man is here talking about fraud. It's a mistake. You need to get down to the salon right now and clear this up. Call me." Her voice was a mixture of confusion and command. The second voicemail, left 10 minutes later, was from Patrice. Her booming voice was reduced to a harsh, panicked whisper. "Elijah, you need to call us. The bank froze our accounts, all of it. The money is gone. Tasha said you went to work. What did you do? You have to fix this. This is my dream. You can't do this to me." Elijah listened to the messages with a detached calm as he unloaded his boxes into a 10 by 10 storage unit that cost him $120 a month. He felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, just a profound sense of finality. By 4 p.m., the tone of the messages had shifted from confusion to rage. Tasha left another one, her voice cracking with fury. "I went home, Elijah. Your clothes are gone. Your drawers are empty. You coward. You ran away. You think you can just leave. After everything we've built, you are going to regret this. You have no idea what you've just done?" But he did know. He knew exactly what he had done. He had refused to be their victim. The consequences cascaded through their lives with brutal efficiency. First, the salon. The $186,000 loan was immediately rescinded by the bank. The check Tasha had deposited was clawed back, leaving the joint account she shared with her mother overdrawn by thousands after the checks they had written began to bounce. The landlord for the salon space on North Elm Street, having received a returned check for the $150,000 deposit and upfront rent, promptly voided the lease and locked them out. The custom sign, the Italian chairs, the new flooring, it was all lost. Patrice's dream of an empire built on a foundation of fraud had crumbled into dust in a single afternoon. Her public humiliation was absolute. Videos of the investigator confronting her at the ribbon cutting were all over local social media by evening. Second, the notary. Cynthia Dubois received her own certified letter. The complaint filed by David Chen with the North Carolina Secretary of State's office was ironclad. It included a sworn affidavit from Elijah and a copy of the forged document. Within a week, her notary commission was permanently revoked. Her employer, the law firm where she worked as a paralegal, fired her for cause, citing gross misconduct. She was facing potential criminal charges and the end of her career, all for helping her aunt and cousin steal from a man she barely knew. Third, Patrice. With her bank accounts frozen and her credit already in ruins, she was financially obliterated. The investors she had convinced to put up small amounts of seed money for the salon, friends and family who had given her a collective $25,000 based on the promise of the massive bank loan, were now demanding their money back. Money she no longer had. She was forced to sell her oversized house in Irving Park at a loss to cover her debts, downsizing to a small rented apartment. Her reputation as a community boss was shattered, replaced by the stigma of being a con artist. And then there was Tasha. When she realized Elijah was truly gone, her panic turned to desperation. She called him over 50 times in 2 days. She sent a barrage of text messages that cycled through every stage of manipulation. Text 1. "I can't believe you would do this to us. This is a misunderstanding." Text 2. "My mother is a wreck. You destroyed her life over a stupid house." Text 3. "I love you, Eli. Please come home. We can fix this. I'll pay the money back, I swear." Text 4. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You'll be hearing from my lawyer. You abandoned me." Text 5. "Please. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Just talk to me." Elijah never responded. He had blocked her number. All communication went through David Chen. Chen filed for divorce on Elijah's behalf, citing fraud and irreconcilable differences. Because the duplex was premarital property and the equity theft was a criminal act, Tasha had no claim to it. In the divorce settlement, she was left with nothing but her half of the credit card debt they had accumulated and the car loan for her RAV4, which she could no longer afford. The David Yurman bracelet was sold to a pawn shop for $200. The emerald green jumpsuit was returned. Her life of curated luxury imploded. Elijah, meanwhile, was living in a small, furnished apartment he'd rented month to month, a simple place that cost $950 a month near the airport. He continued to work his shifts at the dispatch center. He ate simple meals. He saved his money. He spoke to his lawyer. The legal process took 6 months. The bank, eager to avoid a messy public trial, chose not to press criminal charges against Tasha and Patrice in exchange for their full cooperation and a signed confession, which made the divorce proceedings swift and clean. The fraudulent loan was wiped from Elijah's record as if it had never existed. One quiet evening, David Chen called him. "It's done, Elijah. The judge signed the final decree. The house is yours, free and clear. The title is clean. You're a free man." Elijah closed his eyes. He didn't feel triumphant. He just felt quiet. The storm had passed. A year after the ribbon cutting that wasn't, the sunlight once again streamed through the kitchen window of the duplex at 1247 Glenwood Avenue. But this time, Elijah was there to see it. He had moved back in 2 months ago, after the divorce was finalized. The house felt different now. It was his again, entirely. The stark white walls had been repainted a warm, welcoming cream. The ridiculous $2,800 sectional was gone, sold on Facebook Marketplace for $500. In its place sat his father's old leather armchair, which he had retrieved from storage. Its worn leather, a comforting presence. He had rented out the upper unit, the one he and Tasha had lived in, to a young professor from UNC Greensboro. The rent, a steady $1,100 a month, went directly into his savings account. He had set up his dispatching equipment in the small downstairs office, taking a new position that allowed him to work from home. His world was now contained within these brick walls, but it didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a kingdom. His life was smaller, but it was infinitely more peaceful. His $63,000 salary was more than enough. He had no debt, a growing savings account, and an income-producing asset. He was, by any practical measure, wealthier than he had ever been. But the real wealth was in the quiet. The silence was no longer heavy with unspoken resentment. It was filled with peace. He could hear his own thoughts again. He spent his weekends in the garden. The rose bushes, which had been neglected for a year, were thriving under his care. He found a deep satisfaction in the simple, honest work of tending to them, of bringing forth life and beauty from the soil. His hands, calloused and strong, were a testament to his own resilience. One Saturday afternoon, as he was pruning a bush, a car he didn't recognize pulled up to the curb. A woman got out. It was Tasha. He hadn't seen her in over a year. She was thinner. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a t-shirt. Her hair was pulled back in a simple, unadorned puff. She looked like a different person. She stood on the sidewalk, not daring to step onto the property. "Elijah?" she called out, her voice uncertain. He stood up, wiping his hands on his pants. He didn't feel anger. He didn't feel pity. He felt a distant, sad sense of closure. He walked to the edge of the lawn. "I know I have no right to be here," she started, her eyes welling up with tears. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not just for the money, for everything. For not seeing you. For not appreciating you. My mother, she's in therapy now. I'm working 2 jobs to pay off my debts. I'm living in a tiny apartment. I have nothing." He listened without speaking. "You were a good man, Eli," she said, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "You were a good husband, and I threw it all away because I thought things were more important than people. I was wrong." She looked at the house, at the blooming roses. "My mother was wrong too. When she asked where you would go, we never imagined you'd go somewhere better, without us." Elijah finally spoke, his voice calm and even. "I forgive you, Tasha." He said the words, and he meant them. Not for her, but for him. The forgiveness was the final act of letting go, the last piece of baggage he needed to set down. "I forgive you because I can't carry that anger anymore. It's too heavy. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean going back." She nodded, seeming to understand. "I know. I just needed you to hear it." She gave him a small, sad smile. "Take care of yourself, Eli." "You too, Tasha," he said. He watched her get back in her old, beat-up 2012 Toyota Camry and drive away. He turned back to his garden, to the solid brick house that was his anchor, to the life he had reclaimed. True wealth isn't measured by what you can buy, but by what you can't lose. It's not in the Italian leather chairs or the designer clothes. It's in the peace of a quiet morning. It's in the security of a home that is truly your own. It's in the dignity of a life lived with integrity. Elijah had been underestimated, betrayed, and stripped of what he thought was everything. But in losing a wife, he had found himself. He learned that nothing was not a place you could go back to. It was what was left when you gave your power away. And he would never, ever do that again. We all face moments where we feel underestimated. How have you found your strength when others doubted you? Share your journey in the comments below. Your story could be the inspiration someone else needs to reclaim their own power. And if you found inspiration in Elijah's story, please like and subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more tales of resilience and justice.